And we're back talking about Canada's problem with getting natural resource projects up off the ground. Renaud, before the break, you were talking about just the regulatory process and how there's problems with that, people weighing in on these projects that don't even live anywhere near them and potentially grinding those to a halt. I want to come back to that point in a few moments, but I want to discuss sort of what are the big picture consequences. We've got all these examples where natural resource projects are not moving forward. How does it affect people? Let's talk first about, are we seeing maybe like a lack of resources hitting the market because maybe we're stopping a mining project or an oil and gas project, that type of thing?
So it doesn't seem to be so much a lack of resources, but a displacement of where the investment happens. Whenever environmental activists successfully block a resource development project from going online in
Mm-hmm.
Canada, it's just another opportunity for other places, other countries, to step in and fulfill that need. So, if take Quebec, for instance. The province banned oil and gas development a couple of years ago. That hasn't stopped the province from using oil and gas. It just means that we're taking it from
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere. And whenever we don't do these projects here, we don't get the jobs that come with it. We also don't get the regulatory control that comes from having it done here, whereas instead it's being done in places like Qatar, Iran, Russia, places that not necessarily have the best track record in terms of human rights or environmental protection. So a lot of it
Mm-hmm.
is rather displacement, but the other effect we see is the drag on our economy. Canada's
Mm-hmm.
productivity uh, has been lagging for the last couple of decades. And an MEI study found that if we were at the same, if our productivity had kept pace with the U.S., we'd be getting about $10.60 US extra in productivity for every hour worked. So in a year, that works out to about $17,000 per worker. I don't know about you. I don't know a
Wow.
lot of people right now that could afford to say no to $17,000, and this lack
Mm-hmm.
of productivity is mostly drawn by a lack of investment. And whenever we make
Mm-hmm.
it extremely hard or even impossible to invest in some research development project, we're simply driving that investment away from us and into other places where that investment can actually yield some projects.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible when these projects don't go ahead. Like you say, it's the lack of productivity, but there's also a lack of tax revenue. I mean, these projects pay huge, huge amounts of money in taxes and royalties and so forth. What about the geopolitical consequences? I think the best example of this right now is in Ukraine, where Russia has invaded. Half of Russia's budget is coming from oil and gas sales, and then they're taking those dollars and buying rockets and tanks and attacking Ukraine. Do you see this as a major problem that the world is becoming dependent on countries with unsavory human rights track records and maybe they're aggressive militarily, rather than nations like Canada stepping up?
It certainly is problematic, and you can see it just in the sense that most Western nations' embargo on Russia doesn't involve oil and gas because, especially in Western Europe, they have a need for those resources. We don't really want people to die in winter because it can't heat their homes. But it has
Mm-hmm.
it has to reach a point where, for a lot of those countries, they absolutely need Russia. They rely on Russia. They're dependent on Russia. And when we have opportunities such as building those LNG export projects to not only get thousands of well-paying jobs here, but also make sure that we stand by our allies and displace sources like Russia or like Iran that have an abysmal track record in terms of defending human rights and that simply don't have the same values as we do as a country, we could give them a big service while also benefiting from the thousands of jobs that come with it. So, from a geopolitical perspective, our reluctance to do those exports simply doesn't make sense, and it seems to be stalling more at the political level than it is telling in the general public. Because when we ask people, people overall seem to be in favor of these development. It's just the politicians that say, we don't believe in that. We can't do it now.
Mm-hmm. So are they scared of the environmental lobby? Is that the problem?
I think that's part of it. I think a part of it is also the way that we do our environmental assessment process, where we work through public hearings, where those that are staunchly opposed will show up and make some submissions, whereas those that are in favor that don't necessarily have the same benefit or the same incentive to show up to these meetings, unfortunately.
Okay, we'll be back in just a moment with more in a second.